Good day, everyone. I'm Jessica Lockwood with EA Engineering, Science and Technology. Welcome to this Mega Maryland Microsoft Teams meeting. I'm going to go over some housekeeping items with you before we get started. First, I want to let you all know that this meeting will be recorded. All session recordings are on the Mega Maryland website, located in a Google Dropbox. The information and password will be posted in the chat. We ask that attendees remain muted during the presentation, unless called upon to speak. You can also turn off your camera during the presentation if you are not the presenter. If you have a question or technical issue, please type it into the meeting chat. Depending on your version of Microsoft Teams, the icon, which is a chat bubble, is either on the bottom toolbar, which appears when you move your mouse to the bottom of the screen, or on the top fixed toolbar. For this event, the chat will remain open for the entirety of the presentation. However, questions and discussion will be held until the end. Here is Griffin Wilson from Commercial Insurance Associates to kick off today's presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate you all being here. Welcome to the 2020 Mega Maryland Virtual Conference, the premier month-long event for the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. This year's theme is Embracing Today's Opportunities for Tomorrow's Growth. Our mission is to provide relevant and meaningful information inclusive of all members of the AEC industry, with a focus on helping today's small minority women and veteran-owned businesses grow and thrive. The conference is presented by the Maryland chapters of the industry's leading professional organizations, including the Society of American Military Engineers, the American Council of Engineering Companies, the Design Build Institute of America, the Society of Marketing Professional Services, the Mid-Atlantic Region of Environmental Professionals, and WTS International. My name is Griffin Wilson. I'm a principal here at Commercial Insurance Associates, an insurance and bonding advisory firm located here in Columbia, Maryland. Commercial Insurance Associates is a member company of the Society of American Military Engineers, SAME. SAME's mission is to unite both the public and private sector individuals and organizations from across the architecture, engineering, construction, environmental, facility management, cybersecurity, project planning, contracting and acquisition, and related disciplines in support of national security. If you would like more information on becoming a member of SAME, please connect with us through our website at www.same.org. Today's session is a topic that has garnered a lot of attention lately. It is around the new DoD CMMC regulations and requirements, stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. Before we introduce our presenters, I would like to recognize and thank our session sponsor, River to Tap, Inc. River to Tap, Inc. is a certified female minority-owned small business full-service engineering firm, providing civil and environmental engineering, consulting, construction services to public and private sector clients. Whether it is watershed, stormwater management, conceptual planning, best management practices, design development, permitting, design build construction, or operations phase services, River to Tap has the experience and dedication to meet their clients' needs. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our two fantastic speakers from Edwards Solutions that will guide you through today's presentation. First, we have Eric Levitas. Eric leads commercial business development efforts at Edwards. In his role, Eric supports clients to strategically meet security goals and implement a proactive cybersecurity approach. Currently, he is working to prepare government contractors for the upcoming CMMC requirements and is a great resource on this evolving topic. Eric is a Towson University graduate and a Howard County resident. Next, we'll have Brian Hubbard. Brian is the Director of Commercial and Cybersecurity Solutions. With over 32 years of cybersecurity experience, Brian is responsible for all strategic commercial initiatives, as well as development and expansion of Edwards Cybersecurity Solutions area. Brian is a strategic business leader with decades of experience in architecture, designing, and developing solutions to address some of the nation's top security challenges. Brian holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from Purdue. He holds a Master of Science in Operations Research from University of Maryland, Baltimore County. He's also a certified project manager professional and a certified information security manager. Without further delay, here's Eric and Brian.
Great, thank you very much. So I'll take off and lead this, and then let Eric clean up the mess that I leave behind as we go. So CMMC is the topic for today. So that's Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. There's on the title slide here, we have the DFARS and why it is critical time to prepare. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the DFARS is the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations Supplement. And it basically details everything that needs to be complied with in order to do business with the government, in this case, and with the Department of Defense. I'll jump right in. So CMMC was developed because of a problem. And so what problem was it trying to solve? If I can figure out how to click to the next slide, there we go. Oh, well, first, I guess I got to go through the agenda. Sorry about that. So first, I want to go over the DFARS and why all the fuss? Why are we doing all of this? And then give a high-level overview of CMMC itself, the certification process, and how to prepare yourself and your company for success in getting the assessments done. And we'll leave lots of time for question and answers, but again, if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type them in to the chat, and we'll try to pick them up as we can throughout the presentation. So what's all the fuss about? Well, the problem we're really trying to solve is the leakage of information out of what's known as the defense industrial base. Those companies that are doing work with the Department of Defense, mostly it's unclassified information, and what's happening is there's a major drain of that information out to our foreign adversaries. In particular, China is well known to be taking lots of intellectual property and doing wonderful things with them. That's why I wanted to include these two pictures on the left-hand side of two strike fighters. So these were a U.S.-based project. It was for the F-35. Prior to the U.S. ever coming up with a prototype model, the China's J-31 started showing up at air shows. And as it was discovered, it was almost to a T, the designs and mock-ups for the F-35. So what was happening was China was exfiltrating information out of the defense contractors who were working the F-35 and had all those specs, and they were able to take that information and get a jump on the U.S. So that is a major example. There's lots of examples, and as you see here, the Council of Economic Advisor estimated that the loss of information was between 57 billion and 100 billion just in 2016 alone. And so if you annualize that over a 10-year period, that's a pretty substantial amount of money. And despite all the efforts that the DoD is undertaking, and I'll talk about some of those, there's still a major problem, and the leakage continues. And the little headline I clipped out of here from an article back in 2019, 1 in 5 corporations say that China has stolen their IP within the last year. So that continues on. And it doesn't stop at just the big defense contractors. That's one of the fallacies that need to be understood. Often it's the small guys. It's the companies like ours and like yours that are just doing normal business, and the adversaries are coming in to try to find out what they can get. Sometimes it's easier to go after the subcontractors, so people farther down the chain than the big primes to try to get this information. So that's what CMMC is trying to solve, and I'll get through some of that in more detailed information here in a few minutes. So the DFARS compliance, again, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations. So all the way back in 2016, to try to solve that problem that was well known, they came up with a new clause that they started implementing into all contracts, or actually they changed the existing clause. It's 252.204-7012. Usually it's talked about it as clause 7012. And it required compliance with a new National Institute of Standards and Technologies, NIST, standard that was published called 800-171 is the number that people talk about it by. And you have to be compliant by that by December 31st of 2017, if that clause is in your contract. So, and the other thing that's important is with respect to the DFARS and FARS, is that even if the clause doesn't exist in your contract, if it should, it's expected that the company's complying with those clauses. So by December 31st of 2017, in theory, every company that's doing Department of Defense work that handles what's called controlled unclassified information, which is sensitive, protected, but unclassified information, should have been compliant with NIST 800-171. So it also required reporting of cyber incidents. So once an incident is identified, you had 72 hours to report it through a very official channel process through where it was outlined in the DFARS. And all the requirements had to be passed down to your subcontractors. So they were all flow downs. So if you're if you're a sub and your prime contractor had it in their contract, it was not a choice whether or not they passed it down to you. It had to be passed down to you. And that caused a major stir. And so we've had 3 years now, 3.5 years to get compliant that we should have been compliant, right? That all companies should have been. The problem is, there's been a very slow adoption of getting of the contracting officers getting that clause into the existing contracts or into new contracts. There's also been a bunch of false claims. So by signing a contract that has that clause in it, a company is attesting basically that they are compliant with NIST 800-171. The problem is there was a lack of verification. So somebody could sign that, claim that they're compliant, and have done nothing whatsoever to improve their overall cybersecurity program, and no one would know unless something happened. And that's what happened in a couple of cases. And those companies were brought up on charges, and there's been a couple of companies that have been debarred from government contracting due to false claims. So false claims that they were compliant with this clause and then were not at all compliant. However, there still really is no real enforcement. It's up until recently, I'll say that, because I'm going to talk about what's being done to change all of that in a minute. So the solution to this problem was one, we needed a way to verify. We needed a standard that everyone in every contractor could fairly be measured against, that would show that they're compliant. One of the problems with NIST, the existing DFARS clause, was that while you had to do it was all self-attestation, right? So if you developed what's called a system security plan and a plan of action and milestones that said, here's how I currently comply with the requirement, and maybe I only comply with 20% of the requirement. As long as I had a plan of action and milestones in place, I was compliant technically with NIST 800-171, and therefore I was compliant with the DFARS clause. The problem with that is it didn't close any. So companies didn't have to necessarily do anything about the gaps that they had. They just had to have a plan to do something about them. That was just not really helping to improve the overall state of security in the DIB, the Defense Industrial Base. So the DoD got together and developed with industry and with Johns Hopkins University and Carnegie Mellon, and developed what's called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, CMMC, and defined a program around that. In parallel with that, the DoD set out to completely overhaul the DoD acquisition model, and the changes that they did emphasize cyber as sort of a platform, a basis on which everything else builds. So cybersecurity was viewed as so important that it became a real linchpin for the acquisition strategy that DoD is rolling out. So those of you who like to get into DoD acquisition regs can go and dig into that, and you'll see that cybersecurity is all over the DoD acquisition process now. And then the DFAR interim rule, they had to change the DFARS clause 7012 and add some new clauses so that they could actually enforce CMMC over time and really put some teeth behind the NIST 800-171 requirements as well. So that rule change actually just got published late last month, so September 29th, 2020, and there's a 60-day public comment period. So the actual rule goes into effect on November 30th of 2020. So starting November 30th, it'll be a rule that's in effect. It'll start to show up in new contracts, and it will start to be enforced. And there's some enforcement mechanisms associated with that DFARS interim rule that are pretty have a lot more teeth in them, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. So the DFARS rule, the impact of the change. So what it does is it really codifies the rollout of CMMC. So what that means is that CMMC isn't something that you can just turn a switch and everybody in the world's compliant. There's a huge infrastructure. Consider that there are over 300,000 companies that do business with the Department of Defense. That's a rough estimate. I've seen different numbers between 200,000 and 300,000. Once you get up in that range, it doesn't really matter. There's a lot of companies. And companies have to prepare for this. So not all companies can't just overnight be compliant, and the DoD doesn't expect companies to be able to, especially small businesses, to be able to just flip a switch and expend a whole bunch of money to get all their systems up to 100% compliance overnight. So it's being done in a phased approach, and they're rolling it out basically over a 5-year period. So the DoD is going to select a increasing number of contracts each year. So I think there's in 2021, the last publication said that they're going to do about 15 major contracts. So major contracts that's still will affect over 1,000 companies. So there'll be thousands of companies affected, because it's not only companies that win those contracts, it's the companies that bid on those contracts and hopes to win, and that's all the subcontractors in all those major contracts. So and all of the all the tiers of those subcontracts. So if you have second tier, third tier, fourth tier subs, they all will have a requirement to be compliant. And I'll talk about what compliance with CMMC means in a little while too. And then after October 1st of 2025, all new contracts that come out will require CMMC. So there won't be an option. So the contracting officers up until 2021 or 2025, I'm sorry, will have the ability to negotiate with the DoD acquisition program on when they should roll it into their contracts. And again, that'll be an increasing number up to 100% of the new contracts up to 2025. The new rule also puts teeth into, so let me step back. So currently, as I mentioned before, all contracts that handle controlled unclassified information or federal contract information have to be compliant with NIST 800-171. So now the new rule actually requires that you do it. It's still a self-assessment, but you have to actually score that self-assessment, and you have to publish that score into something called the Supplier Risk Management System, SPRS, and that's maintained by DISA and all DoD contractor scores, so that the contracting officer will be required to go and check your score to make sure it's current, because it has to be current within 3 years in that system. And before they can award a contract, a task order, an option year, what have you, has to be checked prior to that. Obviously, what that means, it's no longer, it's no longer just, yeah, we did it. It's yeah, we did it. Here's our score. It puts a little more teeth behind it. So if you if somebody came and audited, and the Defense Contract Management Agency, DCMA, is actually doing a series of audits against NIST 800-171. It's just that they aren't staffed to do all 300,000 contractors. So they'll be doing, but they could randomly select your company and come and audit you. And if your scores aren't representative of what you really have in place, you could find yourself in a lot of lawsuits. So with that, the DoD has also published their assessment methodology, and that is what you have to actually follow when you're doing the assessment. So it's a little more rigorous than what it was before. So that's important to know, because even though CMMC is going to be required over a 5-year period, and you may not see it in a contract until 2025, you are going to see NIST 800-171 requirements in your contracts up until that point. So it's important to understand that the DoD is still expecting companies to be compliant. So what should you do? That's a huge question. And I always say what to do now. So now is the time to prepare. You start with doing a NIST 800-171 assessment now, and you start to figure out what your gaps are, assign projects, to those gaps, to fill those gaps, figure out how you're going to fund those projects. It may be, over a short period of time, or maybe over an extended period of time. That's okay, but you just have to be able to show that you're doing that, and scoring yourself against 800-171. The important piece is, again, prepare now. I'll talk more about why that's critically important when it comes time to actually do CMMC assessments as well. Sorry if this seems a little pejorative, but don't expect sympathy from the DoD if you aren't compliant, because what the DoD has maintained is that by signing the contract, you're already saying you are. So the FAR clause, the FAR itself, the DoD or the Federal Acquisition Regulation, has a set of 15 security requirements in it. So by signing any contract with the federal government, you're basically attesting that you're compliant with those 15 basic requirements. And when you get into CMMC, the base level of CMMC basically is meeting those FAR requirements. It's basic cyber hygiene kind of things, and it's shouldn't be a heavy lift for companies to comply with those things, because it's basic cyber hygiene. What we have found over the decades of doing this work and working with companies to help them, those basic hygiene things are not necessarily being done. And if some of you might be in your IT shops or what, you might look internally and say, yeah, they're really not done that way. So, even though they shouldn't be a heavy lift, for some companies they are. But so you have to understand where you are currently. So that's why we say you really need to prepare now. Okay. So now, and what is CMMC? So CMMC is a set of practices and processes that are intended to cover not only the basic hygiene things, but also the things that you should be doing overall, from an overall systems perspective and integrity perspective and processes and procedures to maintain an overall maintain and improve your overall cybersecurity of your overall program for your company. So not just for a particular system, but there's your overall company. So CMMC has established five maturity levels. Okay, the first and level 1 is the base requirement. So everyone in the DoD that's doing business with the DoD has to be compliant with at least CMMC level 1. So that's an entry point. It's very important that you understand that it's not just companies that are processing CUI or controlled unclassified information, they're really sensitive stuff. It's anybody doing business with the DoD has to at least be certified at level 1. And there's basically 17 controls in that, and we'll go through some of what those controls mean. In that there's practices, and there's basically 17, I say 17 basic controls. They're really practices in the CMMC model. Level 2 was considered sort of an intermediate high cyber hygiene thing. And it was level 2 was developed in order to sort of help people get from the basic hygiene to really good cyber hygiene, which is level 3, which is where you have to be if your contract is going to require you to process controlled unclassified information. And that covers all of the current NIST 800-171, plus it has 20 additional requirements in it for that the CMMC folks decided were important for processing CUI. Okay, and then level 4 and level 5 are really reserved for a very small fraction of the contracts that are going to be really the most critical kind of technologies that they have to have a lot of extra scrutiny on. You know, borderline classified information. That's how I would characterize it. That would be processed in those systems. So I think I covered all that. So that's, you know, just a quick overview of what CMMC is. So, okay, so how's it being rolled out? So again, there's a lot of infrastructure. There's 300,000 companies that have to be assessed against this. So the DoD worked with industry and developed something called the CMMC accreditation body. The CMMC accreditation body is a non-profit entity that was established to basically manage this whole shooting match. And I'll talk about the infrastructure around that and the ecosystem around that in a few minutes. But the CMMC AB is working with the DoD to establish the certification process to train the certifiers so that you have a consistency in how people are certified and how people are assessed and certified across those 300,000 folks. You know, you don't want to have one company come in and assess you and be really hard on you, and have another company assess your competitor and give them an easy pass. You want it to be an even, steady, fair process across the entire community. So this is all happening in 2020. So add CMMC to the C words we don't like in 2020, but it's it was formed in January 2020 was when the CMMC requirements were first published, and then the ecosystem started to get built out with CMMC AB, and just really this month, really I guess the end of last month, beginning of this month, they started what was called a provisional program, where they're actually training up what they call provisional assessors to go out and there's a handful of pilot programs that the DoD is establishing that the contractors on those programs would be assessed through this provisional program, so they kind of get the pilot going. So that's happening now, all the way through the end of this year, and then they're establishing the training criteria for those companies that want to be certifiers, and also training companies that are what we call organizations seeking certification, and that training is going to start late this year to first quarter and second quarter of next year. So the certified training program is getting up and running. Edwards is one of the certified what they call the boy, I've been on vacation, so I'm losing my mind on some of these acronyms. But anyway, we're going to be a publishing partner. We're going to be developing the curriculum to help with the certification program, and also be trainers down the road too. And I'll talk about that ecosystem here in a couple of slides as well. But the ecosystem actually goes live, is on target to go live in spring. So we hope that that goes. Yeah, thank you, Eric. Eric, remind me, it's licensed publishing partner, LPP. That's what we are, and we'll be working towards that. So down on the bottom of the screen, you see how things are rolling out, sort of in what organizations seeking certification should be doing. So now is the time to start to identifying gaps, and start the process of reading those gaps. And then assessments and things will be happening in the 2021. Hopefully, first quarter 2021 was when assessments will actually start in the actual program, and then we'll be able to bid on contracts. Then once those contracts start showing up, the critical thing is that you have to be assessed, you have to be certified prior to contract award. So you don't necessarily have to be certified at the time you bid, but you do have to be certified by the time it gets awarded. So, and if it's not, it's a go, no go decision on award. So that's an important piece. Okay. So CMMC is made up of a series of a whole of 17 capability domains. If you're familiar with other NIST standards, you'll see some very much familiar terms here that are, because it's analogous to the control families in publications such as NIST 800-1-53 or 800-171. But they've done some, added some additional domains in CMMC and divided up the practices and procedures around that. So again, each one of these domain areas has a series of practices and processes that you have to meet in order to be certified at a particular level. So unlike NIST 800-171, where you can do a self-assessment and have a plan of action milestones, in order to be certified at CMMC level 1, you have to meet all the requirements and be compliant with 100% of the requirements of level 1 to be level 1. If you have to have 100% of the requirements met in level 3 to be level 3, et cetera. So the levels are kind of defined this way. So there's practices and there's processes, and these are very much the maturity level kind of concept. If you're familiar with things like CMMI, kind of maturity models. At level 1, the processes are really, you're just performing the practice, right? So it's not necessarily documented. It's just sort of ad hoc. That's basic cyber hygiene. That's those 17 practices that have to be complied with, and then it goes on up. Where the level 2, you're starting to document all your processes, and you're documenting how you're meeting the practices. Level 3, you're well managed. Everything is documented, processed. You're actually, it's in your part of your culture, if you will, within your organization, and you're managing those things on a regular basis. Managing the practices, managing the process can prove basically that these things are in place with your organization, and that's what the auditors will be looking for. They'll be looking for the fact that you actually have something, you've implemented a practice, you've implemented a process, and you actually have evidence that has been up and running. And then level 4 and level 5, again, it gets more advanced, and most likely we won't see too many contracts with level 4 and level 5. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about the journey of the organization seeking certification. Like I said, so every organization has to be certified. So part of that ecosystem that's being developed are companies that will be known as certified third-party assessment organizations, or C3PAOs, and that's the certification process I talked about earlier, about defining the training for those companies and getting that through. That's part of what Edwards is helping the CMMC with. And that's to ensure that every assessment is done at least somewhat uniformly. Of course, there'll be some differences, but over time we expect those to be fairly standardized. So the organizations, the OSCs, they're going to have to really invest some time and effort and money to make sure that all these practices are adopted. Like I said, they need to be part of your culture. So that it's going to take some time. It's going to take some organizational change. It's going to take some ways to get to some time and an effort within your organization to get to be compliant and to be meeting these requirements. But it's also very important for your business, right? So it's not just because you have to be compliant with a contract. These should be implemented, and we always kind of preach this at Edwards. You should be implementing things that are right for your business, that help you do business more effectively. There's a lot of ways to be compliant, but what is important is that you meet the compliance requirements in a way that actually helps your business sustain and move forward. So factors to consider would include things like what does your organization really need from a maturity level perspective. So are you going to be processing CUI? Are you going to need that level 3? Are you going to be going after those higher end contracts where you might need to even consider level 4, level 5? Or are you really just basically going in and you don't expect to have a controlled or unclassified information coming in, but you do know that you have to be at least level 1. So the size of your organization will also dictate a lot about it. And by that, what I mean is maybe you have your whole company is basically one department. Maybe you have 10 departments, and perhaps your particular pieces of your organization don't need to be certified, but others do. So what you're going to want to do is organize your information systems and things around that, so that you can sort of isolate pieces of your organization that would have to be at a higher level of CMMC compliance. So there's ways to do that, so that, let's say part of your organization that doesn't do business at all with the DoD, you may not even want to mess. You may not want them affected at all. If you can isolate them in a way, they won't have to be. So there's ways to structure things, ways to organize your system, ways to organize your structure of your organization to minimize the impact of CMMC on your organization. And take into consideration what are you currently doing as well. What is your current cybersecurity program and practices, and how do those need to evolve or change, or are they fine? And the other thing it's going to take time to get this in place. It takes time to find the assessor, conduct the assessments, and implement the changes. So it could take multiple years to get yourself in a position that you're actually ready to be certified. So all of that needs to be taken into consideration when you're going through this process. So just a little bit about order, but how the ecosystem is functioning. So you can think of, you see organizations seeking certification are kind of in the middle of this bubble. There are currently there's no companies authorized or accredited to certify companies against CMMC right now. That's part of what this ecosystem is trying to solve, and we expect so that's important. The important piece of that is that if you get told by a company, somebody comes in and talks to you and says, "Oh yeah, we can certify you in CMMC. We can have you accredited within the next two weeks." They're lying to you. Okay, so it's important to understand that. No company, absolutely none, zero, are currently accredited or certified to work with companies to actually do a full-blown assessment. There are companies that are there are people that are starting to become provisional assessors. So that's starting to, there are some of those out there that are getting trained up, that are getting accredited. And then there are some companies that are provisional C3PAOs that will be doing work only for a specific set of contracts and a specific set of contractors. So there's not it's not something that you can buy unless you're part of those contracts that the DoD has identified. Let's see, and then on the preparation side of things, which is important now, that's where really the emphasis needs to be. There are people that are being registered practitioners that are going through training and being sort of anointed as what they call RPs, and that's something that's ongoing now. So you'll start to see that in the next several weeks, that individuals and organizations will become registered provider organizations. Edwards will be one of those, and all of our cybersecurity team will be registered practitioners as well. Then there's the training side of that equation, and that's where the licensed publishing partners are now busily working to develop the curriculum that will then be taken by the trainers, the licensed training providers, and the licensed instructors, and be offering those classes out. So it's not only just to train assessors, but it's also to train organizations who may want to have people on staff, the organization seeking certification that may want to have people on staff that can actually help them work their way through the assessment process and get themselves ready internally. So all of that training will be taking place in the near future as well. So again, back to the preparation piece. All companies doing business need to prepare, and they need to prepare now. You got to start. If you wait till an RFP comes out to see the requirement, it's too late. You're going to be way behind the power curve on getting that going. Obviously, I mean, it's kind of self-serving, but we do, highly recommend hiring an outside CMMC consultant. And as the CMMC accreditation body starts to get people anointed as registered practitioners, you want to make sure that you get somebody that's trained, that's been through that process, that so that you know that you're getting the advice and guidance of that's coming right from the CMMC on how to comply with this stuff. And then you want to really look at NIST 800-171 and start to work towards developing that system security plan, getting that plan of action and milestones together so that you can meet the requirements today for NIST 800-171 and have that assessment done, but then also that you can really get those projects going that are going to make you 100% CMMC compliant by the time it's time to get an assessment. And it's important for those executives amongst us here. You need to fund these projects. It's not enough to just have your plan of action milestones. You need to budget for this stuff, and you need to really put emphasis within your company on getting this stuff done. And then once you get in place, it's not enough you don't just comply once and put it on a shelf. You need to maintain your security program over time. So you need to fund for that. You need to staff for that. You need to get all of that stuff appropriately positioned so that you're not just doing this once. It's not, your certification will have to be renewed every 3 years. So you have to be re-audited every 3 years. But in the meantime, you got to actually run the security program. Because if a security auditor shows up and they pull your documents off the shelf and the dust falls off them, and clearly it's not part of your culture, you're not going to pass the audit the second time. Okay, and I'd like to emphasize that it's going to take time to get the security program in place, right? So it's also, and your contracts are going to start to have this requirement coming up in them, through between now and 2025. So your ability to do bid on contracts is really what's at stake here, and your ability to continue to work with the federal government, the DoD first, but then the federal government overall is really contingent on your cybersecurity program going forward. And the initial backlog, I mean, there's 300,000 companies that have to get accredited I'm sorry, have to get certified. There's a difference between those two terms. They have to be certified by 2025, or in that time frame. And probably no later in 2026. By the time all the contracts cycle through, that's 300,000 companies. Maybe there'll be 400 C3PAOs, talk about the certified third-party assessment organizations. There might be a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 or as by the time 2026 rolls around. That's still a lot of companies to get assessed for the number of people that are going to be doing it, going to be doing the assessments. And because this is a go no go decision, you need to be able to pass that audit the first time. You don't want to pay if you don't pass the audit the first time, the company's not going to come back and audit you for free. You're going to have to pay. So you don't want to have to pay twice, but also you don't want to get back in the queue, in the bottom of the queue, and then have to wait and then potentially risk losing a contract because you weren't certified in time for the award. So it's important piece of information. So that's all I had to say. Eric, I apologize because I think I just presented the wrong briefing, but the prettier briefing, I didn't present the prettier one. Anyway, what Edwards does.
Yeah. How you doing, guys? So one thing I wanted to about the CMMC AB board has put together a bunch of accreditation bodies, the training partners, the registered professionals, the certifiers. Before all of that stuff, and Brian kept emphasizing it, you got to do this now. You got to start activating your teams now. You have to start filling gaps now. That's what we've kind of figured out. So Brian mentioned we're a full service cybersecurity company. We've been doing this for a long time, and we've got a lot of experts on hand that have been a part of these different compliance bodies that have come out over the years. And what we've found as being a gap is companies not knowing where to start. So one of the things that we wanted to implement was a quick look gap assessment. And one thing that we've decided to build was something that could be done remotely during these tough times that you can fill out and essentially get given a detailed roadmap of the different projects that you need to undertake. So we call this our CMMC Quick Look. The reason why we call it that is the idea is it's supposed to be quick. It's supposed to be something that's down and dirty. It's supposed to be something expensive, but the deliverables are super robust. So essentially, we have built this service offering to align with the different controls, both for level 1 and level 3. As Brian mentioned, there's going to be a very, very small niche of companies needing to go after 4 and 5. Actually, what we've seen nationally, we've already completed some of these gap assessments for companies nationally, is level 3 is pretty standard right now. There's not a lot of companies going after level 1. What we're seeing is even if you're in the supply chain, if the bid calls for level 3 and you're a part of that bid, you're going to need that level of compliance based on who your prime is. They might require it, or that contract might require it. So sometimes level 1 might not be enough to suffice what the level of requirement needs for that particular bid. So what we're seeing is a lot of level 3 requests. So what these companies are doing now that we're working with is that they're starting to prepare it and they're starting to figure out what gaps exist against CMMC. Edwards ourselves, we do a lot of ISO 27001, ISO 9001 certs. And a lot of times if you have those certifications, you're in a great place to be very much aligned with what CMMC needs you to do, but there's still gaps that exist. And if you don't have those certifications, there's definitely a lot of projects that you need to undertake to build that culture within your organization. So this particular service offering is something that, again, it's a questionnaire that we send you via an online link. You fill it out. We also have an option where Edwards can help you fill it out if that's a need. And once we get back that completed questionnaire, we've got internal folks that have some CMMC experience and taken some training. And again, we work a lot with the CMMC accreditation body that we're going to put together a list of projects that align to the gaps that you have against a specific level of CMMC compliancy that you're going after. Once you figure out those gaps, it's really up to you and us to kind of consult on that. So we would say, hey, you have this amount of gaps that we have found within the current infrastructure of your cybersecurity program. Here are the projects you need to undertake. And here's where somebody like an Edwards would be able to support you. Here are the projects you will be able to take on yourself that you won't need to hire a third party for. It's basic hygiene that you could do internally that will save you a ton of money and a ton of time, but will comply with these different requirements that the CMMC is asking for. Now, what I recommend is, and what we've done internally is we've built a lot of relationships with different managed service providers and accounting firms and lawyer firms. There are different pieces of the CMMC that require different levels of culture changes. So what we recommend, what a lot of companies do now, and that's what I guess this NIST 800-171 is doing, is it's asking you to reach out into your network. It's asking to get a third party's opinion of your current cyber program, and it's asking you to keep it consistent. And this specific service offering is the first step to do that. And then really it's all project-based work until you get audited. And then once those companies get to become C3PAOs, which there are none, and Brian mentioned that, all of the training is actually in raw form right now, and we are one of those 10 companies taking that content, putting it into something that's deliverable, training those providers, and then they'll be able to then certify you. So we're still many months away, but what we're finding in the industry nationally, if you're interested in what some of your peers are doing or competitors or companies that are a part of different contracts that you're going after, I've talked to multiple companies going after CIO-SP4, STARS 3. What we're starting to see is there's requirements of ISO built into it. There's requirements of CMMC built into it that you kind of have to provide a roadmap to what, hey, when are you getting this? Who are you working with? And when do you expect to have this? Because it's going to become somewhat of a requirement. So we're already seeing it bleed out into the GSA schedule. Obviously, as Brian mentioned, it will be on contracts over the next 5 years in the DoD world. And kind of what we're seeing is it's eventually going to bleed out into the rest of the federal government and possibly into the commercial space. They're trying to make and solidify one common standard cybersecurity practice, and the reason why it's called the maturity model is because it's trying to get companies to a specific level of maturity that they feel comfortable providing you that secret information or the CUIs, because of kind of the first slide that Brian mentioned is people are stealing stuff. And if the vendors of the vendors have gaps, those vendors create holes for other people to get attacked, and it could be a really nasty chain of events. So one thing, again, this is something, again, it's a bit self-serving, but we want to show you guys that there's options out there. Don't be afraid. It will definitely cost you money. We definitely understand that. We sympathize with you. We ourselves are eating our own dog food. We're going to get level 3 certified ourselves. So we're going to make sure that we're a part of getting certified, going through the process, getting trained, making sure the gaps are filled internally here at Edwards. But what we want to express is don't be afraid of this thing. This is a good thing. It's trying to create a level playing field so that the big primes can't take all the opportunities. It gives opportunities to the smaller companies and mid-sized companies going after the same projects because of that no decision that you got to have this thing or you can't bid on the project. So if we could be of any assistance to you guys, again, we're a full service cybersecurity company. We run vulnerability assessments, penetration testing, gap assessments. We have a full cybersecurity team that can come and run different projects for you, create policies and procedures, run governance on your behalf. So anything we could do to support you guys, we would be happy to. But the one thing we would recommend is to begin that process now, whether it's us or another vendor, taking the initiative and creating a roadmap now will help you become more efficient when that queue opens up and will help you pass the test the first time, which could save you a ton of money and a ton of time and really give you a great advantage when you're going after contracts. So that's all we have. Brian, if you want to go to the next slide, this is Brian and I's information. Anything we could do to help you guys. We're based out of Columbia, Maryland. We do serve nationally clients. We're a woman-owned small business, about 100 people. We have a great staff, amazing talent, ton of expertise and a lot of cool people. So if there's anything that we could do to support you guys, or if you guys have any questions now, we would love to answer them, because we do know that there's a lot of confusion about this topic. So we very much appreciate it, and we'll leave it there.
Thanks, Brian and Eric. Just a reminder to you folks online, you can type your questions into the chat window, or you can raise your hand using the little hand icon on the toolbar. And once your hand is raised, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Don't currently have any questions in the chat.
I see a hand raised.
Excellent. John,
Looks like-
anybody?
Yes.
Hi, yeah, thanks. This is a very well structured presentation. I've been to several of these. This is one of the better ones for sure. I just want to clarify in terms of, I'm not sure what the right nomenclature is, but self-certification, which is what I take that is the only avenue anybody can take until businesses like yours are accredited or certified to do the assessments later in the spring of 2021. That has to be performed right now by every business. And until the certifications and the audits start flowing, we're kind of on our own in coordination with any consultants we may use to do that, correct?
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's correct. I mean, you're not totally on your own. I mean, companies like Edwards, there are other companies out there as well. They can help you through the NIST 800-171 self-assessment and help you get that done the correct way, so that you can, do your self-attestations. But right now, as you mentioned, the thing to do now is to do that self-assessment against the NIST 800-171, whether it be a totally self, you do it all in-house, or whether you have somebody come in and do a facilitated assessment for you. That's the thing to do. I mean, that you're right about that.
If I could ask a follow-on, so until companies are certified, like yours are certified in the spring of 2021, I mean, how is DoD going to verify compliance?
Yeah, so what they're doing is they're establishing this, through this new interim rule that I mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah.
Let me flip back up to that there, and because I can never remember this acronym. There's so many new acronyms that they've thrown out. The SPRS, the Supplier Risk Management System. That's where they're going to be starting November 30th. They're supposed to provide the mechanism for companies to go and put their scores against NIST 800-171 into this SPRS system. And then of course that acronym doesn't work. SPRS and a Supplier Risk Management System. Anyway, so anyway, you put your scores into the system, and then these contracting officers will be able to go and check that. Currently, under the old, since 2017, what the contracting officers were supposed to do was, when you get a contract that has a requirement, they were supposed to basically request from you your system security plan and your plan of action milestones, so that they could verify that you've actually done the assessment. That wasn't working, so now they've come up with this assessment methodology, and now you have to actually post your scores. So then there's a central repository where they can go and check your performance against the requirements, as well as your performance against other things.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, I see a question. Does Edwards help companies to develop their scores that will be input into the supplier risk management system?
Yes, we do. So when we do what I would characterize as a facilitated self-assessment, because we'd do the assessment for you basically, but it's technically a self-assessment. We would do it against that DoD assessment methodology that would create that score for you. And
to add on to that, that's what we're being asked to do now in addition to a lot of the CMMC prep work. To the point we made earlier, we're at the point now with companies that we're addressing gaps against CMMC, with the interim rule being something that takes into effect in what, 60 days, not even 30 days.
Yeah.
This has been something that we've been asked is, hey, you now need to post this score and you need to do it in a legit way. Can you help? So we've been doing a lot of that from in an interim fashion as well.
And there are a couple of opportunities that companies, depending on your size, and assuming you're a Maryland-based company, there are some programs you can take advantage of to help offset some of the costs. So there's the Maryland tax credit, and then there's the activity run through the Maryland Manufacturer Extension Partnership. And Edwards can help you with that as well. We can help you get through those, see if get applied to those programs, and see if you can get some of that offsetting costs taken care of.
Yep, and to add on to that, the company has to be accredited with MEP to help you with those assessments for you to get access to that grant money. Edwards is one of those. And then when Brian mentioned the tax credit, again, the company has to be accredited to be able to offer you that tax credit. That's another thing that Edwards is capable of providing. So based on the size of your company, based on the location of your company, and based on the specific compliancy that you're going after, NIST 800-171 being the main one, there are 100%, there's grant money set aside to offset pieces of both the remediation efforts and the gap assessment efforts. So, and we're happy to chat with you about that. Let's see. Slides and video, when would they be posted? I assume after this, from Jessica and the team over there. And then Brian, do you see the question from?
Yeah. So the next question was about, will the score be, when you put it up in the SPRS system, will it be public information, or will the DoD view? That's a great question. I need to do some research on that because I don't know the definitive answer to that. I know that all the contractors have to be given at least a view into it so that they can post the scores. I'm not exactly sure the mechanics how that are going to work, but my gut tells me it's DoD only right now. That it wouldn't be something that say a Northrop Grumman could go up and look at your scores, or you could go up and look at other companies' scores. I don't think it's that yet. Now, once CMMC is in place, there will be a mechanism for primes and things to check on certifications once that's gone. But I don't think that'll be through the SPRS system. I think that'll be through CMMC AB marketplace kind of concept. So I'll do some research and try to get an answer out on the SPRS access. All righty. Looks like anybody else? Any other hands raised or anything? Nope. We're good.
And yeah, Brian, if you want to click to the end.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Just so they have our stuff.
Oops. I think I just undid. I just anti-shared it, I think. Or am I still sharing? Yeah,
you're still sharing. If you just want to hit slideshow and view show and just click to the end. Well, awesome. I see we do have a hand. Is it Amanda? Did you want to?
Yeah, so I was trying to type it real quick. I figured I'd just raise my hand.
Sure.
So it seems like it'll be quite an undertaking to get all the companies, the 300,000, in this temporary system, the
SPRS, yeah.
SPRS system. But unless you're in there, you won't be able to bid or to be awarded a project. You have to be at least in there, and that's November 30th.
Yeah, it starts November 30th. So the requirements, so that what that means is that those rules will start to show up in contracts November 30th. And and then I think that the enforcement of that will come sort of at a slower pace, I believe.
But even though it's phased, if there's a project that comes out that has this requirement, then to bid it or to be awarded it, you will have to, and that could happen as early as
that could happen tomorrow.
Now, right?
That's right. Yeah, because NIST 801-171 is currently a requirement, and
Right.
For DoD contracts, you should be seeing the DFARS clause, that 7012, that clause 7012. That should be showing up in any contract. Let me caveat, that should be showing up in any contract that is expected to process controlled unclassified information. So if there's no controlled unclassified information, and if you're old school like I am, think of controlled unclassified information as stuff like for official use only, or information like that. That would be controlled unclassified information. If it was stamped for official use only, you're expected to protect it that way. Now, the DoD is supposed to be marking things according to the new CUI practices, so that they should be doing that now. But if they don't, you're still expected to protect it. But if that clause shows up in your contract, you have to be compliant with the 7012.
So this is on DoD, but on GSA projects I've bid, it's SBU, which is sensitive but unclassified.
Yeah. So GSA hasn't fully adopted NIST 800-171 or CMMC yet. So they never changed the actual FAR clauses. But they, some individual contracts might show, but the requirement might show up. Like we saw it in the STARS 3 RFP, discussion about, and then we've seen it in a couple other GSA contracts as well.
Got it. Thanks. Very informative.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Let's see.
All right.
Cool.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for having us.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eric and Brian. Really appreciate it. As Jessica mentioned, the presentation will be sent out tomorrow, and I encourage you all to check megamaryland.org for a list of upcoming Mega Maryland events. Thank you all very much.
You all have a good day.
You
See you
too.
guys. Bye now.